Hello, everyone. It's Jennie and Laurie of AstroPath, and we're here today to talk about the Virgo season. Now, just as a brief introduction, Jennie is from Hidden Path Astrology. You can find her at hiddenpathastrology.com. Please go to her website, sign up to get her posts. She does these amazing meditation recordings that are really, really helpful. And you do one for each season. Is that right, Jennie?
Yep, that's correct.
So is the one posted for Virgo yet?
It will be by the time this goes out. So
Awesome. Awesome. So be sure to check that out and check me out at astrolore.org. And I do have a Virgo season workbook that I think is kind of fun and pretty helpful to kind of watch the process through with your own chart. You can find that. There'll be a link below. You can find that on Etsy. So I think, is there anything else you have going on that you want to talk about?
Not yet.
Okay. Okay. So I think that's all we need for the introduction. And now we're going to talk about Virgo.
Ooh, Virgo.
Virgo has such a bad reputation. And I think it's my favorite sign. It's right up there. I think Virgo is such a misunderstood sign. What's your off the top of your head take on Virgo, Jennie?
Oh, I really like Virgo too. I mean, let's just go right off the top. It's an earth sign. So we're talking about tangible, practical things that you can kind of get a hold of. It's ruled by Mercury. So that brings in a more mental focus. It's definitely the most mental of the earth signs. So that's an important component to it. And it's also a mutable earth sign. So that means it's the most changeable of the earth signs. It has the ability to turn and pivot like pretty quickly when it needs to, which is not the same with Capricorn and Taurus. Those are both slower to move. So Virgo's kind of fleet of foot. And then as far as themes, I think a lot about wild beasts coming out from behind you. I think about humility, service, like getting to work. I mean, one of the best images I think of with Virgo is rolling up your sleeves and, getting your hands dirty, like whether that's doing dishes or, harvesting things in your garden, or helping somebody that needs a hand. Maybe a neighbor needs you to help bring packages into the house. I mean, it really is these very kind of basic tasks that Virgo can bring our mind to. So that's kind of off the top of my head. How do you want to add to that? There's lots of ways you can.
I guess the thing that I love about Virgo is of all the signs, Virgo has an ability to see potential. And that's what gets it its bad reputation and the best part of it. Because on the harder level, Virgo can be really critical. There's a lot of this cat is doing weird things. He's not a Virgo. But the criticism that Virgo is accused of being really critical and picky, and it's because they can see that potential. And there's a frustration that Virgo can get into when it doesn't feel like it's able to reach that potential. But the thing that I love about Virgo is that the reason for trying to reach that potential is not for to shine the spotlight on them. It's not a Leo thing. It's Virgo, the humility of reaching the perfection of something is for the service of others. And that's the thing. There's a kindness in Virgo. If you encounter people with a really strong Virgo energy that seem very critical or picky, you can guarantee that it's because they're trying to reach a potential that they're having a hard time getting to, and the self-criticism is a problem. If they're being critical of others, it's really self-criticism. Kitty cat, go find something else.
Well, something else that you just brought up is like the thing to always remember with the zodiac is it's a wheel. So each sign comes out of a need to balance the sign before of it. So Virgo is very much coming after that regal, royal, potentially pompous sign of Leo that really can take all the oxygen out of the room potentially. So I mean, there's lovely, wonderful things about Leo too, but Virgo comes in to say, hey, you know what? What about us peasants? What about the common person? What about people that need support, that need sustenance? And it really kind of brings down the focus into this other place. And because everything's part of it. You know, one isn't better than the other. It's just that there's this constant balancing. And in that wheel, you know, Leo is a very yang outward sign, and then Virgo's like this yin earth sign that kind of says, okay, let's slow down and let's settle down and let's analyze what we really need to do next. And I think that's some of the thing you're talking about with Virgo, its ability to be totally discerning about what's important, like what's the wheat, what's the chaff. We need to pitch the chaff and really kind of work here with the wheat and make sure that the harvest is going to happen. So it really does have that quality to it.
It's a great, and you know, one of the things that I always think about with Virgo season coming right after Leo, you know, you can just think of it seasonally. Here we are in the Northern Hemisphere, and everybody wants to go to the beach and sit in the sun during Leo season and party. And then the sun moves into Virgo, and it is such a tangible shift for all of us. And part of it is, you know, we've been trained throughout our lives, those of us who have grown up here in this country, you know, the sun moves into Virgo, it's time to go to school. It's time to study. It's time, you know, Virgo's ruled by Mercury, and it really is. It's time to start thinking and planning and getting real and preparing for the colder months ahead. There's so much, there's so much effort, and I just love Virgo. I could, you know, carry on about Virgo a lot. It's a very good energy. So it's also a time I notice, you know, as an astrologer, all of a sudden, you know, there's not a lot of clients during the heat of Leo season. All of a sudden, the sun moves into Virgo. People want to talk to their astrologer. They want to get clear on what's upcoming. So yeah, be in touch.
Yeah. Because it has that planning component to it, which astrology is so helpful with. So yeah, so yes, be in touch.
Yes, be in touch.
But what
that was a shameless plug that I didn't even plan.
Can you tell we're both Leos? But I was just thinking the last thing I really want to say about Virgos is just super hardworking. And I think that, and then the service piece, I think it kind of comes from it being tied into the harvest season in the Northern Hemisphere, because that's the time when you got to get out in the fields and you need a lot of work needs to be done to harvest everything, to get people fed, and then to put the food up so that it lasts through the winter. So it's such an important busy bee sign. There isn't tons of time for contemplation. However, one of the themes that we're going to, as we start getting into what the season is about, there is a Mercury retrograde coming up. So with a Mercury retrograde, we do have a little bit more time to kind of contemplate what's important. What do I really need to do here? What do I need to make sure I include, the deeper things of a process that I need to include? So yes. Okay.
Yeah, this is a really interesting Virgo season. Are we ready to open the chart?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, let's do that. And then we can really get into some of what we're carrying on about here.
Itchy nose. Okay. Excuse my itchy nose. All right. So Virgo season, this is happening on August 23rd. It is 5:01 a.m. Eastern time. So please adjust that to the appropriate time and day, wherever you are located as you're watching this video. Yep, there's the sun at 0 Virgo. And I think what's really interesting about the season, well, first of all, a lot of things we could talk about, but first of all, you may notice we've got 3 planets in Virgo at the beginning of the season, and that there are also a couple planets opposite in Pisces. So just wanted to note that we have this kind of Pisces flavor happening throughout the Virgo season. That's something really obvious to look at. You'll notice the sun is opposite Saturn. I mean, basically right when it comes in the door, and that Mars and Mercury are opposite Neptune. So this just brings in that you know, Pisces Virgo polarity to some degree in the backdrop, which to me is just all about perspective. And opposition is a viewpoint you can really see, and then you've got the perspective of Pisces, which is the big picture. You know, the big picture of like what's going on the whole planet. You know, what is, you know, how are people suffering? Pisces is always going to bring in the thing of that. Can you have more compassion for what's going on in the bigger picture? Those are some of the themes that Pisces brings in. And then Virgo's very much like, and we're going to do something about it. We're going to make a to-do list. We're going to roll up our sleeves. We're going to involve other people. I mean, these are all things that the Virgo season wants to do. So start with that.
Yeah, I think that's great. Thinking about the polarities always balance each other out. And it's so great to see how the month starts, the season rather, starts with these two oppositions.
Mhm.
It really
Yeah.
does. It gives perspective. It gives us something to think about. And then
Yeah.
immediately after the sun moves in, I think the very next day, or no,
The
shortly
same day, I think.
that same day,
A couple hours.
Mercury goes retrograde. And so Mercury will be in Virgo through this entire Virgo season, and it's retrograde from the 23rd until September 15th, when it will go direct. And its retrograde is from 21 Virgo back to 8 degrees Virgo. So it's going to be in the same house with the sun the entire time. And it's, because Mercury rules Virgo, it is the most important planet throughout this period of time, the strongest planet. Let's say that.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause
Yeah, I know. You have
all
to.
the other planets have to answer to Mercury all month long. Everything has to answer to Virgo, which really makes this particular Virgo Mercury retrograde really important. Just thinking about a Mercury retrograde as a time to be reevaluating your thinking, your plans, your ideas anyway, but then putting it in its own home sign during Virgo season. This is really an important time to pay attention to those to-do lists and the organization and the replanning, the rethinking, all of that, reevaluating your thought processes. And
Mm-hmm.
as we start, Venus is still retrograde. So we've got an overlap of these two retrogrades, which I think is really interesting. We have been since July 22nd, I think was when Venus went retrograde.
That's correct.
I think that's right. Yeah. So since July 22nd, Venus has been retrograde. It's going to station direct on September 3rd. So between the 23rd of August and September 3rd, we've got both of these retrograde. So our values are being reevaluated, and we've been working on that. And you and I have talked about it a lot through different videos that we've done. And now Mercury joins the party of reevaluation. It's like, okay, you've been reevaluating your values. Now, what are you going to do about it with your mind and your voice and your, really taking practical action in Virgo?
Yeah, I mean, it's really an interesting little week. I mean, there's not very many time periods. They're always pretty short when both Mercury and Venus are retrograde. And it's a nice little intersection of considering your values and how you express yourself, which is the Venus and Leo. And then Mercury and Virgo is your mindset, your thinking, like maybe it's some training that you need to get. There's different ways to think about it. But that little week gives you time to reflect on both of those things before things kind of shift. The other thing that is really cool about the Mercury retrograde period is the only thing it does in that time period is it trines Jupiter. And part of what's really interesting about that is Jupiter doesn't budge this whole month. It's at 15 degrees of Taurus, and then it's going to station retrograde on September 4th. And even at the very end of the season, it's still going to be at 15 Taurus. So 15 degrees of Taurus is an important point. It's bang in the middle of the very, very fixed sign of Taurus. So this is an extremely stable position for Jupiter to occupy. I mean, I sort of have been thinking about this as like the hub of the wheel. It doesn't really move, or everything else spins around it. And the fact that the Mercury retrograde trines it, it's just an awesome flow of energy. It really brings a tremendous amount of stability to whatever that process is that you're considering during the Mercury retrograde. So it's a very stabilizing, practical support system that is in place. And it really, I know some of you kind of freak out, oh, it's Mercury retrograde. Mercury retrograde is really helpful. It's really useful. It's a time to retreat and review. And with this trine to Jupiter, like we got you. Like, you're being supported. Like, there's a real holding that's happening while you're doing that. And, so I think that is a very helpful thing. It's going to really draw your attention to what systems in your life are stable, what support systems really help you. And even if you have a lot of crazy things going on, I'm sure you can think of something that is deeply supportive to you. And that's what it's going to bring up. So I like that.
I love that. I think,
Yeah.
people get all freaked out about Mercury retrograde. And over the years of working with Mercury retrograde, I'm always excited to see Mercury retrograde coming, because it is a time to catch up, with things that you've left undone. And, I've talked ad nauseum about that, I think, over the years to people. But this Mercury retrograde, particularly being in that practical sign of Virgo, and with that trine to Jupiter being the only aspect it makes through this whole retrograde, that's beautiful. That's really, really beautiful. And there is something about that 15 degree, that middle degree of the fixed signs, that is an important degree, an important point of stability. So pay attention. I think this is going to be a really good Mercury retrograde for us.
Yeah. It's just something so stable about Jupiter there. I mean, Jupiter's so much about expansion, but I don't know, it's providing this like rock to hold on to in the middle of everything else, which is just, I'm curious to see what ends up going on in the public eye in the next few weeks.
The conversations
Yeah.
that are being had, that have been had, with the Mercury retrograde, it's redoing conversations as well as projects and planning and all the other things that Mercury might refer to. But it's, reviewing our conversations we've been having with people and in the public sphere.
And who supports you? That's what I keep thinking about too,
Yeah. It's a very, very beautiful thing. Okay. So I think the only other thing I want to say about Mercury retrograde right here is make a list before we get to that Mercury retrograde. If you're listening to this video a few days before Virgo season starts, make a list of everything that has been left undone over the past several months, all the projects that you haven't completed, and work on those. Don't worry about starting new things. Just work on getting caught up.
Yeah, that sounds good.
And hopefully your computer's in good shape. I'm a little concerned about mine as we head into Mercury retrograde. That's the only thing.
And the midpoint of that cycle is going to happen on September 6th. So you really want to have your kind of things sorted out, what you want to do by that date. And then again, it stations direct on the 15th. So that's great. So the other thing about this month that I think imparts quite a bit of flavor, we've already discussed how important Virgo is and how important Mercury in Virgo is, and the fact it's retrograding and all those things. The other thing that's really cool is that we have this grand trine energy throughout the whole season. And it starts, quite honestly, with Mars. Mars, right before the season starts, it trines Uranus. And then right after we get into the season, it trines Pluto. So it kind of sets up this grand trine of Earth energy. And as you can see by Laurie's drawing here, it's a pyramid of very stable energy. I mean, this is just what a trine is. And so it's a really nice flow from one thing to the next. And this grand trine energy is reiterated by the sun towards the end of the month. It trines Uranus on the 15th, which is the same day that Mercury stations. So I think that this kind of gives this really lovely flow energy throughout the month. So not only are you kind of doing your reflections with the Mercury retrograde, but you also have this support of what's going on in the bigger culture. It's something to see, again, to look outward of yourself to see what's going on in the culture. But it really is a nice Virgo season with this situation of the trine setup. So
yeah, it's really going to be interesting to watch it, because Pluto and Uranus are not personal planets. I mean, they will impact us personally in different ways, but they are, cultural, big picture planets. So really watching what is going on in our culture, in the bigger world stories, of which we know there are many, But there's a lot going on. There's a lot that has potentially really good results, I think.
Yeah, I know so I don't know. There's a lot of just really this earth energy again. Think about earth things. Getting grounded is what it can mean for you personally, but it also really refers to tangible, practical things you can touch, like matters that you really can see and feel on a central level. Um, the other thing, the only ingress this month is Mars going into Libra. So right after it trines Pluto, which is on August 24th, at the very beginning of the season, it goes into Libra. And that's the only air sign. I think that might be pretty noticeable because air kind of gives you the moment to kind of step back and get a little space from things. Mars is not thrilled to be in Libra, especially with the South Node there. But nonetheless, it's going to give this little bit of space around your actions where you're going to be able to kind of go, because that's what I think of with air as space, the ability to take a breath. And then I think there might be some questions around relationships that come up, like just because of Mars being in Libra and the South Node there. So pay attention to that too.
Huh, that's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that. But yeah, Mars is not delighted to be in Venus's sign of Libra.
Yeah. So, I guess the important thing is like, if you know that, you feel yourself getting into argumentative mode, it's just gives you the opportunity to go, wait, is that really what I want to say or do? I don't know. That's part of why we're doing these videos, right?
Right. So yeah, following that, we come into the full moon on August 30th. Right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, we sure do.
And then that reiterates that opposition between Pisces and Virgo. And we'll be making a video specifically about that full moon. So we don't need to belabor it here, but that does happen on August 30th at 7 degrees of Pisces.
Nice. Yep. And then you have Venus stations direct a couple days later on September 3rd. So that'll be an energy shift, and we're going to come out of that little double retrograde period. And then on September 6th, we have the midpoint, as I mentioned earlier, of the the Mercury retrograde cycle, midpoint, and also the last quarter moon in Gemini that day. And I think that, and then I guess you have that trine to Jupiter. So
yeah, that happens on the 8th. The sun trine Jupiter. Is that what you're talking about? The sun trine Jupiter? Yeah, that's on the 8th, right?
Yeah. And then there's not a whole lot of stuff going on until we get to the new moon, which interestingly is happening at 21 degrees of Virgo. And I say interesting because that's the exact degree that Mercury retrogrades earlier in the month. So it's lighting up that 21st degree of Virgo again. And then the very next day, Mercury stations direct. So there's something about whatever process you started at the Mercury retrograde on August 23rd, there's something about that new moon that's going to let you see it again or take it to another level. Or what do you think about that, Laurie?
I'm not sure what to think about it, but I think it's really interesting. And I think that it's something to pay attention to. Okay. Pay attention to that. What is it, August 23rd when the Mercury goes retrograde? Because that's, whatever you're thinking about at that point, then when it comes to the new moon and the idea of planting a seed, and this is in Virgo, and whatever it is you're thinking about, there's something in that the seed is. I mean, there's such a focus on Virgo this month, such a, with that retrograde going on.
It's just powerful when you have that repeat number. So I also would say, as you like to do, Laurie, say anyone who's got something in mutable signs, but especially Virgo at around that 21 degree mark, so a couple degrees on either side, just think about that because that's the place. Yeah, I think I know somebody with their ascendant there. Anyway,
that's really interesting. That's really interesting because that new moon. Can I be personal for a second?
Yeah, please do.
That new moon is conjunct my ascendant, and it's the day before. I mean, I guess I can see how this plays out personally for me. It is the 14th is the day before my manuscript is due to the publisher.
Awesome. Love
So,
it.
and what do you think I'm going to be working on with the Mercury retrograde that starts on the 23rd? Those couple of weeks are going to be very, very, very focused. And then that new moon. That's interesting. That is interesting.
Yeah, so that's a great example too for anyone listening. Like, this is what we're talking about, something that you're working on, and then there's a moment where you have to put a stake in the ground on that very thing that you were considering earlier in the season. So
The
yeah,
thing that you're working on with the Mercury retrograde, you then have the opportunity at the new moon to, put the stake in the ground.
yeah.
Send that manuscript out. Maybe I'll send it out a day before it's due.
Well,
A day
it won't
after
get
is
there till
close
the
enough.
15th. Yeah. So, that's really exciting. And actually, that same day that Mercury stations direct is also the day that the sun trines Uranus, which is really, bringing to light this theme of the grand trine of Earth. So, you have that.
Beautiful.
And again, I mean, that's about sun trine Uranus. There's a lot of energy there. I mean, there's a lot of, there's something afoot. There's something exciting. There's something about to change. And because it's a trine, it's a pretty big flow of energy, coming at you. And that kind of it's setting up the really strong theme in the last part of the season of this grand trine of being whittering on about like early on. So that's also exciting. So yeah.
That's lovely. That's so interesting. I love how that all kind of plays together. Yeah. So all of you, if you've got your chart in your hand, look at where these degrees hit, and you can kind of see where these things really resonate in your own life.
Yeah. And that's the whole point of, these videos too, is to kind of help you think about these things, yeah. And then, I mean, just to finish out, so then we move into, well, I'll just briefly mention, this is the only square of the season, happens on September 17th, is between Venus and Jupiter. It's the third hit of Venus, It's kind of like, what do we say for that one? Just kind of like, just don't let your ego get in the way. That's all. That's all you need to do. Just don't get all ego, because otherwise it's not really it's like, I guess it's don't get fixed in your ego because it's fixed signs. But instead lean into your relationships and feeling grounded and those kinds of topics.
Yeah. Yeah. Venus and Jupiter can't get too problematic, even in a square aspect, because they just resonate with each other so easily. And yeah, getting overly egotistical can be an issue with that square, or being overindulgent, don't get gluttonous, or, I always tell people with that aspect, leave your credit cards at home. Don't go shopping online when you shouldn't be.
Yeah. Yes. So that's just, it's funny that there's only that one square, because I mean, that's part of why we're saying this season is so much about flow, and because there's 5 trines and there's only one square. And there's only 2 oppositions. So speaking of which, September 19th, we have the sun opposed Neptune, which is an opposition. And again, that's that oppositions always bring viewpoints. Like, I kind of think of it's like you climbed up to the mountain and then you look out at the view and you can see the peak of the other mountain over there, right? It's kind of that is what I end up thinking about a lot. And with it being in Neptune, it's kind of funny because on one hand it's clarity because it's an opposition, but on the other hand it's not clarity because it's Neptune. So there's something about your viewpoint that it's interesting to see what will come to light for each of these.
I just think it's so interesting that in those days between September 15th and September 21st, we've got the sun trining Uranus, opposing Neptune, and then trining Pluto. So, it's the sun will be down here, so it'll look like a trine and an opposition. But it's just so interesting because those are the 3 outer planets. Those are the 3, planets that are not terribly personal. This is really bringing something in that has to do with what's going on in the culture. And I see that opposition, that viewpoint that you talk about with the opposition, that clarity of view, even though it's Neptune, so it's not real clear. But I think there's something in that about maybe just paying attention to people that you think are confused, and listening. And just paying attention to other people's viewpoints and releasing your own judgment. One of the huge problems, I think, in our
Right.
culture right now is we seem unable to talk to people who don't think like we do. And where does that get us? That gets us into untenable position where we're just in an echo chamber. And one of the problems with a grand trine is it can become an echo chamber. I think this opposition with Neptune is really very important. It kind of gives us a softening ability to see what is not us.
Right.
And
I like that. Yeah.
you know,
Nice.
the one of the best things about Neptune is the ability to see another person's suffering and find compassion in yourself. So I think there's, you know, we might not agree with our neighbor or whoever on social media, and we think they're a jerk, and, you know, we've got all our opinions. Well, shut up for a minute and look at the fact that their opinion comes from somewhere, and have some compassion and some understanding. Yeah, I don't even know. I think I'm going off on a limb here, but I think there's something really important here about listening, paying attention, and being kind, the kindness of Virgo.
You know, I don't think you went on a tangent at all. I think that what you're sort of getting at is this might play out as an opportunity to see what you consider to be the delusions of others, or what, quite frankly, just are the delusions of others. But in that same moment, you can recognize, okay, well, they're a human being. And like, I also need to have compassion for that. And like, just to understand that if people do have awakenings in this time, that it's not easy to admit that you want to change your opinion or your mind. And it's not, you know, and so I think that that's part of the compassion too, like just being able to go, we're all humans, we're all complicated, and yeah, being able to see into those things is important and part of the theme here.
And we all are deluded.
Yeah,
You
we
know,
all
we
have our
all have our delusions. We all, you know, none of us are like, oh, well, they're deluded. You know, we're all human. And
we're
we
all
all fall
idiosyncratic.
into we all fall into rabbit holes. Let's be real here.
Yeah.
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 There's plenty of people in my life that think astrology is a rabbit hole I fell into, a crazy delusion. You know, I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly.
yeah.
And maybe it is, I don't know. Whatever. The important thing is to not get too like enamored of your own stuff, but to keep the Virgo season as an example of just thinking about how are you helping other people. Like that's really what I mean. There's a lot of things Virgo can do, but I think that that's the one I always come back to. It's just the ways that we help one another. We don't live in a vacuum. We live in a society. We have relationships on very personal levels and broader, and Virgo allows us to kind of really consider that, and this opposition in particular does that. So all right.
Okay, so I think we're done. And I
Yeah.
think we need to move on to the personal impacts. This
Do
has
it.
been really a fun conversation, Jenny. Thank you so much. I'm
Yeah, thank
going
you, Laurie.
to actually pause us. No. I'm
Was
going to. Okay, so let's think about how this is going to impact individuals. Now, first, we're going to start with people with Aries rising. Virgo season is
Mhm.
going to fall in your 6th house. So this is really a time to get clear about the practicality, the real day-to-day routines of your life, right? I mean, that's what the 6th house is about. The 6th house is about your day-to-day routines that support your health. It's
Mhm.
kind of the natural Virgo house, isn't it? So yeah, that's where you're going to really be, your focus is over the course of this month. I could say that 5 different times.
Well, I think the other thing you want to think about, because Mercury retrograde also is here, so we don't want to forget that. So what Mercury retrograde allows you to do is just poke a little deeper. Ask yourself, are my routines supporting my health? Are they supporting my ability to get to work on time with the right lunch and with, you know, in the right transportation? You know, I mean, these are the things that you really want to pay attention to in this time, because you're being asked to take a deeper look. And ultimately the sixth house is about supporting you, in your livelihood and how you earn money and all those things, but it's also about supporting your health, which in a lot of ways, in my mind, is number one, because you got to have health to function the rest of your life. So that's kind of what I think the season really kind of brings to the forefront.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was just thinking about the Virgo retrograde in there, and really allowing you this space of time to reconsider your dietary habits. It's your habitual stuff, your routines, your habits, how you take care of yourself, rethinking your dietary habits, your exercise habits, all of those things.
Yeah, and during this season where we have this wonderful grand trine, this is bound to affect all these other parts of your life. It's going to affect your financial situation. It's going to affect your career. I mean, there's a really nice flow happening here. So as you take action in the sixth house, it's going to flow into those other parts of your life. How you feel about yourself, your self-worth, but also just overall your profession. And that's just super helpful. So extra impact.
So yeah, the grand trine is really creating a flow in those areas that are about your material, how you materially care for yourself, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay. Anything else on that?
I think we covered it.
All right. Next, we're going to talk about Taurus rising.
So Taurus rising, Virgo season falls in your fifth house. This is your area of creativity, the way you give of yourself. This is also has to do with children, but like child energy, playfulness, that kind of thing. And it's interesting with Virgo here, because we don't think about Virgos being very playful, but at the same time, like, you've got to set the container to be able to do these things. You've got to decide you're going to do them and plan them out and make it happen, or nothing happens, so that there's that kind of focus here. So with the Mercury retrograde here, you really have time to think about what creative pursuits are you working on? How do you access joy and playfulness in your life? What do you need to do? Like, who do you need to reach out to? There's a communicative function to this in order to make those things happen, to set those plans, to have a really good time, have some joy. So I think that that's a great use of Virgo season for Taurus rising.
Yeah, it's so funny to think about Virgo with the fifth house, because I tend to think the fifth house is all about playfulness and all that. And like you said, you've got to plan to have a good time. There has to be the practical planning involved in it. And how does a person with Virgo in their fifth house, how do they express themselves? They express themselves with a lot of practicality. They're not going to, if a person with Taurus rising happens to be an artist, they're rather unlikely to do huge, colorful, dramatic artwork. They're more, there's more of a specificity and structure involved. But yeah, with the Virgo rising there, it's really, the Virgo retrograde being in that sign, in that house for you with Taurus rising, it really does invite you to reconsider how you are expressing your creativity, how you give love out into the world through your creativity, your child rearing practices, how you show love to the world.
Yeah, and with the grand trine affecting you on in your personal chart, it really just promises to help you express yourself in general. Your sense of self, but also your philosophy and your wisdom, and those other things are going to be part and parcel of this. So it's a very effective time. I think one of the dangers I was thinking about is if you are somebody who's quite critical, as you were talking about the artist, piece, Laurie, like if you're somebody who's quite critical, this might be a really great time to undo some of that self-criticism with the Mercury retrograde, to kind of get to the bottom of it, because it could be really blocking your ability to express yourself creatively. And I just see a danger there with that, because Virgo can really slip into that. And kind of hem and haw and not get things done because it's stuck on that self-judgment piece. So if that's you, think about a way to work with that. What came into my mind was that book, The Artist's Way, where you kind of commit to doing a lot of writing to undo some of those things. So anyway, just a thought. Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. I'm going to move on then to those of you with Gemini rising. So that puts the Virgo, all this Virgo energy that we're talking about, into your fourth house of home and family. And so, yeah, that's a place where you tend to be rather practical and you want things a certain way in that area. With Mercury doing its retrograde here, you're really, there's the Mercury retrograde is really inviting you to rethink how you connect with people within your home environment, how you connect to your ancestry or that whole line, that deep area. The trine that we've talked so much about in this video so much is really highlighting your the houses that are involved with intuition and deeper understanding. So there's a flow there. There's a flow of a great deal of practical flow, really encouraging you to bring this practical focus to your home and family.
Yeah. And I like how you brought in those other houses too, because really all of those houses have to do with behind the scenes. They're all kind of hidden from view. So it's like your emotional part of your life, like as you said, the intuitive and instinctive parts. That's what it's kind of funny having such a practical focus in those. It really allows you to work with deeper emotional content in a very practical, tangible way, which can be extremely helpful. So I think, yeah, when you're talking about the lineage and the home thing, like the home life, I was thinking about, I was thinking about someone I know who's a total neatnik, and it's just like, where does that come from? Why are you a neatnik? And like, and I know the answer. The answer is because there's so much chaos in the early life. So coping with one's family, you as an adult, you can become, as you become a neatnik, there's a reason for it. It's not just a shallow thing. So this just gives you an opportunity to, I don't know, look at that stuff and witness it and just ask how you want to be. What's the priority? Because Mercury retrograde will help you understand what the priority is. What's the most important thing in your home life?
Okay. All right. Let's move on then to those of you with Cancer rising.
So Cancer rising, this brings Virgo season into your third house of communication. Let's talk about the third house for a minute. The third house it is about communication because it's about your immediate environment and how you navigate it. So you got to be able to talk to people. You got to be able to talk to people when you step out of your door, you say hi to your neighbor, you ride your bike up the street to the store, you got to be able to talk to the cashier. These are these kind of very basic logistical tasks that the third house can work with. But also can be writing practice. You maybe you're writing a book or working on something else. This Mercury retrograde is going to be a great time to kind of go back and get clear about what's on that list to do with your writing project or other ways of communication that you're thinking about. So really important time for that. And furthermore, just thinking about your social relationships in general. This is an opportunity to think about, how do I interact with everybody? We talked about the cashier and the neighbor, but also like your partner and your community. Like, how are you have an opportunity with the grand trine energy to see how what you do in this third house impacts these other areas of social relationships in your life. So very helpful to think about that in that context.
Yeah, I love that this, just bringing in the idea of how the grand trine is really supporting the work that we're doing in the house where Virgo is. So yeah, with Cancer rising, that the Mercury retrograde is really bringing your attention to really learning a deeper level of how you communicate, how you interact yeah, it's interesting. I was just thinking, I kind of got this little thing in my head. I'm not even going to try to, sorry. That was a moment. But just, with the Mercury retrograde in that house, there is an element where you're really rethinking how you communicate. You're really trying to understand better your own communication skills. And with the grand trine, bringing in the other social houses, the house of the community and of your relationship, that bringing a smooth flow there. It's that flow is really supporting the learning a deeper level of your communication, and vice versa. So
Yeah,
I love
yeah.
how the
Yeah.
grand trine is supporting the work that the Mercury retrograde is doing. It's really beautiful.
I agree. You know, and it's something else I just, for some reason, this keeps coming up to me with these things, but just, I don't know, a little bit of the cautionary tale around Virgo, in the sense that, like, Virgo is such a lovely, helpful sign, you know, but you've really got to watch for that self-criticism. And here I see the potential for negative self-talk, and negative, and just negativity in general. And so this is a really awesome opportunity if you're listening to this, because I struggle with this a little bit. I have Cancer rising, for sure, can be an issue. This is a great opportunity to work with it, like to take a step back and look, you know, because really what you want to be doing is be contributing. What Virgo really wants to do is contribute, and help with people. And so you want to kind of be able to get out of your own way to do that. And this is a wonderful opportunity to do it. So
That's great. That's great. Okay, no self-criticism from you, Jennie Date. All right. So we're going to move on now to those of you with Leo rising. So this puts the basic core energy of the Virgo season into your second house, which is really the house of your self-worth, money, resources. And with Virgo there, you know, this is a really practical, this is a practical conversation in your head. If you have Leo rising, you get really practical when it comes to your money and your worth. So with that being said, you know, again, the criticism, you were just talking about the criticism of Virgo. You can get very self-critical about how you spend money, how you make money, and certainly your self-esteem. It's interesting how those things come together and how connected our self-worth is to what we've got in the bank account. It's really interesting how those link together. So at this time, with Mercury doing its retrograde in there, you're really rethinking that connection. I think there's something in that connection. And if you're really critical about how you spend money and how you make money, and your self-esteem is struggling, just understanding that there's a connection between those things, for one thing, and really learning to find ways to be helpful with your finances. I think that's a real key with Virgo here in this second house. If you can be of service to others with your money, not like you have to give all your money away, but to be of service, even if you know, find a cause that you believe in, send $5 a month. It doesn't have to be a lot, but something that will really help to support your self-worth there. And then when we think about that, and thinking about the grand trine, how the flow of the month is really supporting that learning. The flow of the month is coming through all three houses that are involved in our material resources, our, you know, the practical areas of our lives.
Yeah, so in other words, you know, this work you do around money and how you value yourself is going to do nothing but flow out into your work life, into your practices, your routines. You know, it's going to support all of the things that you're doing that have to do with, you know, material wealth, as we've discussed, but also, you know, physical health, and also the fulfillment of your social, you know, reputation, your social contribution that is part of being a human being on the planet, you know. So while you're kind of quietly doing the second housework, it's actually flowing into these other places that are going to enable you to make a bigger contribution altogether, which is ultimately what Virgo is interested in. So
right. And you think about that too. It can come back, you know, like the work you're doing there, going out to these other areas with that grand trine, but that grand trine can really support an increase in your finances too.
yeah, and I like the idea of everybody trying to work on balancing the Virgo, right? Like kind of get away from that self-criticism or whatever it can be, because I think it's something we all kind of deal with. And then, or maybe I'm projecting, but
well, we've all got Virgo somewhere.
But anyway, so I think this is with the retrograde, it really, and the support, what a great time to do that work. So
yeah.
cool.
Yeah, we've all got Virgo somewhere. And that's the thing that's so interesting in really working with astrology, is understanding that all the signs are part of all of us. It just shows up in different areas, but we've all got that self-critical voice someplace. And
Yeah.
speaking of a self-critical voice, let's go on to those of us with Virgo rising.
So Virgo rising, I mean, this Virgo season is, front and center in your life. Like you can't look away from it because it's right there in your first house. So that's really just bringing that whole, it kind of brings in this very large question for you, Virgo rising, because that's part of your life direction. Your life direction has to do with this hard work and this idea of wanting to help others, be of service in some way. And I think this is a great time for a little overhaul in terms of like, wait, what are you doing? What do you need to get done? Like, what things do you need to take a look at with the Mercury retrograde there, and set the agenda? It's kind of like adjust the agenda a little bit. Like maybe the agenda is a little bit too much in one direction. Just give it a little tweak. Because there's a lot of support for this work right now. With Virgo rising, that grand trine really is supporting everything about your self-expression, the way that you really express yourself in the world through your creative works, through your wisdom and your personal philosophy. I mean, all of those things are are going to be able to follow along with this little switch that you do with the Mercury retrograde. So it's really a lovely time to make a shift that puts you more in alignment, with practical service and help in the world.
Very good. So yeah, the Mercury retrograde, you are really doing a reevaluation of how you present yourself into the world. Maybe it's time for an actual haircut instead of just chopping it off in the mirror. Who knows? But at any rate, it is a time to reevaluate how you express yourself. And there is so much support for that within that realm of self-expression, how you express yourself. That's lovely. Okay, we're gonna go right on then to those of you with Libra rising. So with Libra rising, this puts the whole Virgo focus into the 12th house. This is a really behind the scenes area of your life. And, we were talking a minute ago about self-criticism and how, we all have Virgo somewhere. With Libra rising, that self-critical voice is really hidden away. And there's something here being supported by the Mercury retrograde of really doing some deep inner work on understanding your own habitual mental processes that are hidden from you, really going in and doing some work. And maybe you've got a therapist and you're doing some really serious work in therapy. Maybe it's a way that you're doing your own internal work, but this is a time to be doing some serious work on your inner unconscious thought patterns. And the support for it right now is very intuitive, very, very available, with the grand trine really pulling up on, kind of coming to an understanding of your own deep core, maybe your family core, and how you set boundaries with other people. There's something in all of that you are learning to understand and doing that deep inner work.
Yeah, and to add to that picture, I think what's coming to my mind is you're talking about these difficult kind of emotional sublayers that are hidden away from view. For those of you with Libra rising and that being the focus, I just keep thinking about, well, these are physical practices. In other words, one great practice, the practice of yoga, is a way of bringing your mental stuff out of your head and then out through your body. And I just think that physical practices could be extremely helpful with Libra rising to work with this as part of what you're doing. So you might be doing some talk therapy, but I think that some sort of therapeutic body piece is going to be important as well, just because of you know, that you have this earth energy in these behind the scenes kind of areas. So I think that that could be a really helpful thing. It could also be writing, but it's something tangible that you can see and point to and feel, you know?
Yeah, Virgo's such an interesting sign because it is earth and it is so grounded and stable, and it's ruled by Mercury. So it's really, you know, the analysis and the practical. It's interesting. It sort of brings together air and earth in a way.
Yeah, it's like, how do you get out of your head and get into your body? Because in the head you can spin out and spin and spin and spin, and it's a fantasy world. But then but the body is like a tangible piece to work with, and so it helps you work with it. I agree. I think it's funny how Virgo's kind of exactly like very earthy, but because it's mercurial, it's also brings in the mental headspace, which is really, really key.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I love that with the planets, you know, and their rulership of two signs, just really realizing that each planet, the two signs that it rules, are going to be in different elements. And that really it's just really interesting to think about that.
yeah.
Anyway,
so, nice.
moving right along, we're going to go on to those of you with Scorpio rising.
Okay, so with Scorpio rising, Virgo season has everything to do with your community. I think that with Scorpio rising, I sort of sense that you're going to be the type of person who really wants to be of service. You really want to help. You really want to make a difference. And how you're going to do that is in the community. You're looking around you and you can see all these needs in the community. And that's really important. But the flip side here is that the 11th house is so much about how you receive support from your community. So you might be showing up to help out, but you're also very much letting that community lift you up and give you a purpose and make you feel part of something whole. And that is something that is so important to all of us as human beings. So this Virgo season really kind of spotlights that. And especially with the Mercury retrograde, you're having a moment where you can kind of consider all that and kind of ask yourself those questions like, you know, am I helping my community? Do I feel supported by my community? You know, these sorts of things, and being willing to, well, serve a different community if that's what needs to happen. I mean, Mercury is allowing you to make a movable decision here because it's retrograde and it's in Virgo. So Virgo is mutable, so it's movable. So overall, I would say too that work that you do that has to do with allowing your community to support you is going to filter out into all of your other social relationships as well. That's because that grand trine is activating the other houses that have to do with social interaction, your overall communication, and also with your partner. So in other words, the work that you do here is going to impact those other two places as well. And it's in a really great way.
Yeah. Yeah. And those other two areas, your partner and your the community represented. Yeah. The closer. What am I trying to say, Jennie? My brain is just
you're talking about, well, the third house.
I'm thinking
right?
about the third house. I'm just thinking
Yeah.
about the third house. So, you know, it goes both ways. Your community supporting your relationship and your day-to-day communications and those relationships that are involved in the third house, and your partner and your siblings, neighbors, etc., supporting your community. And the only other thing that I want to say is I just want to talk a little bit about what community means, because it's one of the things that I bump into with people a lot. It's like, you know, something will show up in their chart that's really focused on community, and they don't recognize what that is, what community is for them. A lot of people just don't seem to immediately recognize that, and they think it means a group of close friends, and it doesn't. You know, close friends are more of a seventh house issue in my way of thinking of it anyway. The 11th house, you know, originally when I was first studying astrology, the 11th house, the way we thought about the 11th house was it's your hopes and dreams for the future. That's, you know, the first learning I had about the 11th house was just that, your hopes and dreams for the future. Well, the way I understand community of the 11th house is it is the like-minded people that support you to your hopes and dreams for the future. So, you know, it might include some of your close friends, but it might be totally people who are just, you know, part of a, who knows, a church group or a culty group, or your astrology friends or your yoga community. You might not know those people really well, but they are supporting you. A yoga community is a great way to think about it. You have your hopes and dreams for what your yoga practice is going to, where it's going to bring you in your life. And that community, you might not know any of them, but they are there to support you. So, really understanding community, and with the Mercury retrograde, thinking about that. What does community mean to you? Who are the people that support you? So yeah, you have a lot of support in that area right now.
Yeah, that's great, Laurie. Yeah.
So, okay.
Think about.
Now let's move on to those of you with Sagittarius rising. And this puts that Virgo focus into the 10th house. So let's talk about the 10th house. 10th house is your career, your vocation, your reputation. Not everybody has a career or a vocation, but everyone has some sort of a reputation. Everyone who does not know you well, but sees you walking down the street, they'll think, oh, that person, that's the person that grumbles as they walk down the railroad tracks. It doesn't, you don't have to have some big opulent presence in the world to have a 10th house. We all have a 10th house. And with Virgo there, your vocation or your reputation really has to in some way involve being of service, helping others on a very, very practical level. So for those of you with Sagittarius rising, with the Mercury retrograde impacting this area through this season, you want to really think about, really be reconsidering, how is my career, vocation, reputation, how is that of help to others? Oh, there used to be a book I remember. Oh, I just remember the cover of it. It was a red cover and it said, how do I help? Was the name of it. I don't know. It just came to mind. But really, that's the question for you. How do you help? What do you do that is of service and help? And during this season, with all these beautiful trine aspects happening, there's a lot of support. There's a lot of support from your practical day-to-day routines, your own self-worth, maybe your finances, but these are the things that are really uplifting and supporting your exploration of how to be of help.
Yeah, it's interesting that the Sagittarius rising, well, for that matter, any of the fire signs rising, but we're talking about Sagittarius, but where you have these, these practical earth signs in these areas of life that have to do with your material basic needs and your livelihood, your earnings, that kind of thing. So for Sagittarius rising, yeah, it's very much about the practical labors that you do or the things that earn you money. And so yeah, that could be of course you could think of like manual labor or things like that, but with Virgo on the 10th house, it has to have that service piece. It can't just be, I'm going to go and dig a ditch. Like it's going to be, even if you're doing work on people's houses, it's a service to help people with their broken parts of their houses, so there's a subtle way in which this Mercury retrograde might just allow you to tweak your view of whatever the service piece of that has to do with your work. And let you see a way that you are being of service or a way you need to make an adjustment to satisfy that. So that's kind of, and we've talked quite a bit about just, making sure you're not in the sort of out of balance Virgo state, which is the self-criticism and almost the crippling judgment one can make of oneself, especially in a society that emphasizes the work life so much. So it's a great opportunity to undo some of that and to reflect on that service piece and just make some little adjustments, and a wonderful opportunity to support really for that whole process. So
it really is. This is a beautiful Virgo season. I'm loving it. I think that's great. Okay, so now we're going to move on to those of you with Capricorn rising.
So Capricorn rising, this Virgo season is very much centered in your ninth house. The ninth house is just that place of worldly experiences where you have an education or you go out into the world or you meet a stranger in the street and you learn something totally new and different, that kind of elevates your viewpoint. So I think with Virgo here in this ninth house, your ability to think critically is so important, is such an important piece of it. And to make sure that that critical thinking is the type of critical thinking where you are separating the wheat from the chaff and like getting to the heart of the important stuff, not the type of critical where you're criticizing yourself or even others for their viewpoints. It's really this idea of discernment. So when you really get to that, which if you use this Mercury retrograde to kind of figure that out, like where, how are your thinking, critical thinking skills, if you really kind of use this time period to get to the bottom of that, it could be very fruitful, because it's very important to have clear thinking in this worldview part of life, because there's so many opinions and delusions flying around. Like for somebody who can think in concrete terms, you are so valuable. So I think that that's an important piece. And also with Capricorn rising, this is just part of your self-expression. And that grand trine that we went on and on about in the beginning, it's really just a support to allow you to incorporate this Virgo piece into your entire personality, how you express yourself creatively, how you walk around in the world and how people see you. So it's a potent and lovely time with some flow to work with all of those things.
Yeah, that's I was thinking as you were talking, I'm thinking about that Mercury retrograde in there, and the things that you need to be considering about your worldview. Possibly you're realizing you need more education, or it could be that you realize you need to understand other cultures in a deeper way. So these are the kind of things that expand that worldview and enable you to, that the discernment. There's something in that discernment of your worldview that you can really be of service with your worldview. In your conversations with other people, in your connections with other people, you have this ability. I love that discernment of Virgo. You have this ability to see both sides. You probably have a unique position in our incredibly divided world to, as long as you're not lost in the self-criticism of your own worldview, you have that ability to kind of see both sides, and not in the way that Libra does, in a much more practical way. But there is something in there. But the question is, do you need more education? Do you need to see more of the world to really gain the discernment needed?
Yeah, I like the way you're putting that too. So I was thinking as you're saying that new moon on the 14th, right when Mercury goes direct, this is going to be, you want to have figured that out at that point, I think. But you'll hear more about that in our new moon video.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay.
That's great. Okay.
So let's move on to those of you with Aquarius rising. Now, this brings this Virgo focus into your 8th house. And I really like Virgo in the 8th house because of the whole discernment thing. The 8th house is where we have to grapple with the deeper layers of relationships. It's where we have to grapple with things, other people's values, other people's belief systems, other people's money, and to be able to really be discerning about that area can enable the work of the 8th house, which is very much around setting boundaries and, knowing your own place in order to hold that. I think there's just such a value in developing and working with this area. So with the Mercury retrograde, you're going to be really reevaluating your boundaries. That's going to be a big piece, is really reevaluating the boundaries that you live with in your relationships with other people who think and behave and live very differently than you do. There's a lot of support as you work on understanding those boundaries and then instituting some new ones, perhaps at the new moon, right? Which we'll talk about at the new moon. But there's a lot of support from that grand trine. Where's that support coming from, Jennie?
Well, I was just thinking as you're talking, I think what the support is about, it's about resolving perhaps some emotional issues, some emotional struggles that this season really presents you with this wonderful opportunity to, as you kind of dig in and reevaluate what boundaries you need to set for your greater well-being, and also to be more of service to others, which is interesting to think about those two ends.
Yeah.
It's providing you with a sense of healing. I think it's helping you heal your roots. It's helping you heal some of the subconscious patterns. Like, they're all tied together, and there's a flow here, which we don't always get. So it's taking advantage of that. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I really like that. Thinking about the flow from your familial roots, your ancestral roots, and from your own deep unconscious. There's such a intuitive flow, allowing you to see beneath the normal way of understanding your boundaries and why and how you set them. So
Yeah.
I think that Mercury retrograde really allows some really deep work in this case. And when the new moon comes, you'll plant a seed and start, setting different or new or better boundaries for yourself.
Yeah, I think that with Aquarius rising and also the other two air signs, Gemini and Libra, this is just a profound healing opportunity.
Yeah.
Like to really heal some more difficult emotional stuff through practical means. And again, we talked a little bit in some of the other ones about like physical practices. Like, I always think about yoga because it's been very healing for me. But there are other forms, Tai Chi, other forms of body movement can be really helpful. And also writing, because Virgo brings in that writing, that tangible writing on the page. And you may be able to think of some other things in your own life. Really anything using your hands is going to be helpful, like art, pottery, those sorts of things. But nonetheless, what I want to really get across is the healing opportunity that's here for Aquarius rising.
And it's
So,
real. Yeah, it's on a very deep emotional level. That's great. Okay, so let's move on to those of you with Pisces rising.
So with Pisces rising, it brings that Virgo season firmly into the area of your partnerships. And again, let's just reiterate, yes, that's your marriage, your close one-on-one relationship, but it's also your close friendships. It's also those like friend dates you go on when you go on a walk for an hour. In that hour, it's a seventh house hour, So like, it's really all of those one-on-one connections that you have. And with Virgo season, you're really just getting an opportunity to kind of dig into that. With Mercury retrograde, you're kind of looking under the hood. That gives you the opportunity to really go, well, how do I show up when I'm showing up with these other people? Like, how do I show up as a partner to them? Not just how is everyone a partner to me, but really giving that inward look, because that's what the retrograde kind of allows you to do. And ask, are you where you want to be in those relationships? Are you helping friends and partners as much as you would like to? Like, are you meeting your own heart's desire around how much you want to help in those relationships? And the really neat thing is while you do that particular work, you're also kind of healing all of the possibilities of your social relationships. You're looking at your very shallow day-to-day, oh, look, there's the mailman, or the mail person, just that, or being out in your community and, maybe you're helping, what just came to my mind was removing invasive plant species. Like, maybe you're helping a community do something like that. Who knows why that just popped in, but anyway.
Or clean up after a flood or a fire.
Yeah, Lord knows there's lots of that going on right now. So yeah, it really does bring that in. And it's healing on a lot of different social levels. So
yeah, there's a lot of support for you really deepening your understanding of who you are in relationship. Yeah, and I think people misunderstand that often they think about the seventh house and it's about that other person. Well, it is about that other person, but it's about who, it's our chart we're looking at. It's not their chart. That's a whole nother conversation. And when you're looking at the seventh house in your chart, you're going to be looking at, who you are in relationship. And with Virgo there, you want to be of service to these individuals that you are very, very close to. And like Jennie said, the seventh house is about all kinds of one-on-one relationships. It's your business partners, it's your romantic partners. And that person you go on a walk for that hour. So there's plenty of opportunities. Hopefully you've got people that you're working with. But with the Mercury retrograde, you're really reevaluating your own understanding of who you are in partnership.
Yeah, and I can't help but add the cautionary tale of Virgo, which is if you find yourself being very critical of your partners, in particular with this one, it's time to take a look at that, because really it's about your own ideal. With Pisces rising, you're probably pretty idealistic. And ultimately, you need to be more realistic in your relationships. And so you're going to want to lean in to being realistic and being kind rather than kind of harping, because that is something that can happen. Also, of course, you can internalize that and harp on yourself by sort of saying, gosh, why do I always say that thing to my partner? Ugh. Those are also places where you want to go, okay, I need to kind of, let's back that off a little bit and go into the more kind of helpful, serving in a positive way place rather than in the criticism judgment. I think it just could happen. So, and again, if you notice yourself doing that, great, you've noticed. Now you can work with it. Right. So that's what you're aiming for. And that's what this retrograde season will allow you to do too. So just want to mention that.
Great. That's great. I think that's really important to mention. And I think we're done.
Yeah, I think we've covered it. So
I think we've covered it. And I think that this is a really exciting Virgo season upcoming. And I'm really looking forward to it. Although I realized today that the day we're making this, 30 days till my book needs to be. Yeah, I'm counting the days. I'm getting nervous. But the retrogrades are very helpful. Don't ever get nervous. Don't listen to all those silly memes about how horrible Virgo retrograde is. Mercury retrograde, rather. Just don't let that get to you. Make a list of what you need to get done. Don't start all kinds of new projects. Just focus. Do what you need to do. Virgo is here to help. These other planets are definitely here to support our movement forward. And there's that.
Yeah. Close the door, buckle yourself to your desk and get to work. But Laurie, I know you're going to get it done because you have 1,000 irons in fire. So.
Oh yeah, I'll get it done. I might be up late some nights, but I'll get it done.
Well, thank you, everybody. And thank you, Laurie.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Jennie.